And that is the common thread on this channel, is that art and capitalism just don't go together. Not my usual video. Also, can we get some commotion for this green room? It's still pretty echoey in here, but like this is kind of the new office vibe. We do not have shelves. We're not set up. Anyways, I wanted to quickly film this video because I know this is going to be old news in a minute. Not that anyone asked for my opinion on it, but I feel like it's an interesting discussion. It should go without saying before I start, this video is going to be a discussion about publishing and meritocracy and the industry, and is not intended to be a hate video toward Luke Bateman. This is just going to be a recap of all the discussion that this situation has generated. If you're new here, my name is Kris and I am a speculative fiction writer. I write science fiction and fantasy. My debut novel comes out in the fall of this year, and I have gone through the typical trad pub process very recently. So if you haven't heard about what's been going on, Luke Bateman is an Australian creator who started a BookTok account, and in a month, he generated like 100,000 plus followers. As a conventionally attractive white man who was already kind of a micro celebrity, which we'll get into that, but he was set up for success in a space like this. In any case, he wanted a space to talk about books, which is fair. You know, everyone deserves to enter BookTok and be welcomed and to discuss books and literature and find their people. But I knew that this account was going to blow up. And again, when I talk about pretty privilege and being a conventionally attractive white man, it's not because I'm trying to say anything about like the quality of his like contributions to BookTok, because he came onto the app to talk about books. But the reason that I think he blew up at the rate that he did was because, again, he was this like very masculine presenting guy entering a largely female BookTok fantasy space. So yeah, I saw his first video, maybe half of it, and then I scrolled and completely forgot about him until just this week when I heard everyone in uproar because a male BookToker got a 2-book deal from a major publisher without having written a book. I thought, there's no way. There's no way that this is that Australian guy that came up on my For You page a month ago. But it was indeed about him. This creator had signed a 2-book deal with Simon & Schuster. Let me be very clear. Everyone has been up in arms about this. Everyone has been discussing it. And there's all these like different discussions that have been happening. This is my 2 cents. I was not shocked or flabbergasted that this happened. Like, didn't really think that much about it. No author who has been in this industry longer than 5 seconds could have been surprised about this. I understand the idea of an influencer with a sizable platform deciding to write a book, querying it with no difficulty, getting a book deal with no difficulty. But I think the reason that this has been more controversial than like other book deals where a prominent figure has like gotten a book deal like very easily without much work, I think the reason that this one has been generating so much discussion is because apparently he sold a fantasy series on proposal. That is not the norm. I have been hearing whispers that Bateman might have had a pitch and a partial. The point still stands that even if it was a pitch and a partial and not just the pitch, it doesn't change the fact that the rules were bent to reward him. There are people who have been like, I guess, defending the situation by saying that authors are just being dramatic by getting upset about this, and like this is just par for the course with publishing. This is just how things work. And while the latter may be true, I don't think that this means that these conversations still aren't worth having. Because to be honest, I didn't care that much when I heard about this, but I can totally understand just like why this has like really blown up as a talking point on TikTok, Threads, Twitter, etc. Publishing is a business. That's just the society that we live in. And that is the common thread on this channel, is that art and capitalism just don't go together. Some things that are important to note. Luke Bateman is an ex-professional rugby player in, I believe the league is the NRL, and he was also a contestant on The Bachelor Australia. That context is important because clearly he wasn't someone who just popped onto social media like a regular guy. However, I have been seeing these takes that have basically been saying like, well, because of that context, he's a celebrity and this is a celebrity book deal and this is how celebrity book deals work. They don't need to have a book. They just need to have a name. This is like true in some ways, but I think the reason that this argument still isn't like resonating with people, or people are still not letting it go on that fact, is because I fear we are all overestimating how big of a deal it is to be a rugby player in the NRL and a contestant on Bachelor Australia. Because how many people knew him from that before they knew him through BookTok? Maybe I'm ignorant and I apologize to Australians, but I don't think that that alone is enough clout. We know that this is true because he has said in his own words that this deal really only happened after BookTok, after the BookTok account. We'll backtrack for a second and we'll talk about what a typical path or publishing process looks like, as well as why I think the discourse around this book has been driven largely by marginalized authors and creators. So the typical path to get traditionally published is to write a book, edit the book, query it to literary agents, sign with an agent who will hopefully take you on, edit it again with your agent, go on submission to editors, wait for an editor who's interested, and this could never happen. That editor will hopefully take it to the rest of their publishing house. And even if an editor is interested, they have to basically meet with their entire team. Everyone on that team has to agree to acquire it and like discuss its commercial potential and if it fits with the list of their imprint. Then and only then does an author get presented an offer. You cannot get a book deal without having a book written. Publishers do not typically offer book deals for fiction novels on proposals and ideas alone. This only really happens for prominent media or celebrities, or if you're like a pretty big celebrity who is going to be publishing a fiction novel with ghostwriters. That is probably when the book doesn't actually need to be written. The publishing process can take a lot of time. It can take, I would say minimum 2 years, but it's probably more like 5 years, 10 years, depending on how long you've been cooking the book. It can take multiple failed attempts, and no one knows the exact statistics, but I've seen agents talk about how they receive like thousands of queries a year and they sign maybe like 5 to 10 new clients a year, depending on the size of their list. The fact that a BookToker, and sure, like an ex-reality TV show star in Australia, could get a book deal without a manuscript or without a finished manuscript, we can maybe see why it's ruffling some feathers for people who have been writing and working on their craft and trying to get published for so long. It's not that someone was able to just like skip the line. It was like there is like no concept of a line. So just to speak briefly about my own experience, I sold my debut novel last year. It's coming out this year in the fall. It wasn't an easy process to get published. It was an uphill battle at every stage. It was a lifetime of writing, honing my craft, writing multiple manuscripts, shelving those manuscripts, rewriting them, learning from my mistakes, rewriting them again. Personally started writing at the age of like 7, 8, I don't know, definitely elementary school. I am going to be 27 when my book is published. I wouldn't trade that time for anything. I know the work that I've put in to deserve that accomplishment of my debut novel. Now, that doesn't mean that if I had been given a 2-book deal from a Big 5 publisher without having to like try that much, that doesn't mean that I wouldn't have taken that deal. I think most authors would take that deal. The thing though is that who is being given those deals, you know? I'm not alone in that struggle. Like I am not special for having worked very, very hard to even make one step into the industry, because this is how it is for most authors. And I even count myself lucky that I get to publish on my first try. Not my first book ever written, but my first time in the query trenches and my first time on sub. I got extremely lucky, and I acknowledge that it is a mix of hard work and luck, and the luck part is like the part that most authors can't control. There are many very deserving authors who shouldn't have had their books die on sub, but that's the reality of the industry. We know it's not about the art. Anyway, I'm not going to go so far as to say that Luke Bateman's whole BookTok account and writing personality happened out of thin air, because I don't really think this is true. In his first TikTok video, I remember him saying that his like friends suggested that he start a BookTok account because he had this interest in fantasy books. He also states in like one of the interviews that I read that he did, I guess after the book deal announcement, I think like the very masculine, I suppose, culture that he experienced as an athlete playing rugby, it wasn't really considered like cool to be reading a fantasy book. And so we can kind of understand how maybe he didn't like have a community in his close circle. So if we take him at his word, then this is a genuine passion of his, and he's happy to be known for something that he's interested in and not just because of rugby or because of The Bachelor. There are also still people wondering if the BookTok account was started because maybe he already had the book deal and they wanted him to build more of a presence in the book community and to capitalize on BookTok and to like align his previous brand more with books. That is only speculation. Again, we don't know if that's true, but in that same interview that I was reading, this is what he said about the deal. It's funny, I actually reached out to a publisher 6 months ago and pitched the book. I've truly wanted to write a book my whole life, especially in the last couple of years. It's been something I've really wanted to do. So I reached out to a publisher and pitched the book to them, and they never got back to me. Then all these TikToks took off, and my management company reached out to a few publishers and said, hey, Luke has a book that he'd like to pitch. Would you be interested? He was just like, I want to write a book. I have an idea for a book. I have thoughts. I have concepts. I have a dream. I have concepts of a plan. It was only after he had the BookTok following did his management approach publishers again on his behalf. But if it is true that he secured this 2-book deal basically just by having 100K TikTok followers and interested in fantasy books, and like he has an idea, like that is something else. And to be clear, the issue isn't that people with large platforms shouldn't write books or that they're inherently less deserving of publishing success, or just because they're influencers, their books are bad. That's obviously not true. We haven't read his writing, but like the writing wasn't the reason for getting the book deal. And like that's the injustice that people are feeling, you know? It's just more proof that success is based a lot on who publishers throw their resources behind. Having watched some of Bateman's TikToks and I watched his book deal announcement, he seems like he does like books. Which like, yeah, the bar is in hell, but he seems like he does like books, and he says that he's wanted to be an author for a very long time. But yeah, just to go back to the whole, like, who wouldn't take that deal? Like, he says it's his dream, and I think like he's not wrong. He's not like the ultimate enemy in this situation for having his book deal basically handed to him, because yeah, who wouldn't take that opportunity? You basically skip all of the difficult parts of publishing and you just already have the deal secured. That is a once in a lifetime opportunity that most writers with a dream and a manuscript are not actually given. Most writers with a dream and a proven sales record and experience and other books on their belt aren't given those kinds of opportunities. I saw a tweet from someone whose take on the situation was just that, again, this is how the industry works. They want people with platforms. Like, they obviously just did this because people with platforms can get book deals easily. You know, there's obviously truth in this, but I think that the overall tenor of that take is dismissive to the actual conversation that largely marginalized authors and creators are having. First of all, 100K TikTok followers doesn't immediately equate to being a breakout success, although this controversy is probably going to drive some sales. I think what they probably have seen in someone like Luke Bateman is a marketable brand, author brand. It's still a risk for a publisher to take on an author who has never written a book before. The book isn't done yet, unless they're going to be using ghostwriters. I don't know if they will. It seems like Luke actually likes books, so I don't know if a ghostwriter will be involved. And writing a book is hard, as many of us know, like even those of us who've done it before and done it multiple times. So if he really is writing his own book, I would be impressed if that was true. To speak again about marginalized writers who've been weighing in on this controversy, it's not that any of us don't know this industry, that we are shocked by this. We are living through this industry, girl. We are speaking from experience when we talk about how much the system isn't built for us. When we're told that our books aren't marketable, that publishers, tell us that readers just can't connect with our stories. Most people with actual opinions on this situation aren't sending hate towards Bateman himself, but are just trying to use this as an opportunity to talk about the systemic inequalities in publishing. So I think reducing or deflecting any critique or discussion of this situation into just jealousy and hatred and bitterness is an inaccurate depiction of the substance of the conversation, because obviously the solution isn't that now we should give a BIPOC book talker a book deal and that will balance the ledger. I also don't think the solution is that we shouldn't give book deals to celebrities or popular media people, that's always going to happen. Nor is the solution that we should pay white authors less or any other kind of bad faith take that you want to extrapolate from this. The point is that I think these conversations are still worth having, because it's not only an opportunity to remind ourselves of these unfair, unjust norms in the industry, it's also an opportunity for writer solidarity. The only reason that publishing is a fraction more accessible now than it was maybe 30 years ago is because authors and just publishing professionals in general speak more openly and share knowledge and experience and insights that you previously wouldn't know unless you already had connections in the industry, or maybe you were in a workshop. Propaganda I'm not falling for is people trying to say that there's no point in authors reacting in the way that they have to this entire debacle, because if we think back, movements like Publishing Paid Me or Own Voices were largely led by writer solidarity and not because publishers decided to one day care about marginalized representation in fiction in the stories that they acquire, or pay discrepancies between BIPOC and white authors. It happened because we started talking to each other and calling things out. This is also not me saying that being white automatically means that you're going to be the next Luke Bateman, or that you're going to be made a lead title, or that you don't experience rejection or hardship in this industry. I was watching a video from a book talker that I really like, Haiti the Scribe, and one of the things that he has said in response to people getting really upset and mad or getting super defensive whenever he talks about systemic equality in publishing. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, "Being white doesn't mean your life isn't hard. It just means that your whiteness isn't the reason that your life is any harder." In this case, Luke Bateman wasn't given a book deal because he's a white man and that's it, but because the system at every stage set him up for success. His conventional attractiveness as a white man didn't hinder him. Ex-reality TV show contestant, he was a pro athlete. He entered the BookTok fantasy space where in 30 days, he was immediately given a massive platform. That doesn't mean that I think that he deserves any kind of hate. Doesn't mean that I think whenever his book comes out in 2 years that people should read it looking for reasons to be mad at it. He doesn't deserve that kind of treatment. When we look at the kinds of authors who are being given these once-in-a-lifetime career opportunities, it's very clear who publishing in general decides are safer bets to take risks on, because publishing is always inherently a risk. A company is fronting money to invest in you. So it's very clear who publishing thinks whose stories and experiences are marketable and worthy of taking risks on. There was another incident recently with a Korean American author, Susan Lee, who is not a debut. Her most recent contemporary romance novel came out May of this year, and she spent out-of-pocket money to arrange a book tour and to do a lot of her own publicity, which is unfortunately extremely common. She is based in California, which is where the biggest YA book festival in the country, Y'all West, happens every year. And so she tells her publisher, a Big Five publisher, that she's local to this massive event, and they didn't even want to send her there as a representative author. And it's not like she's even asking for accommodations or flights or whatever. Erin Aceves is a bi-Latino author whose YA contemporary novel, which is fantastic, by the way, I have read it, literally earned out its advance, sold well, got good blurbs, good reviews. He is a creative writing professor in the US, and he has spoken about how difficult it is to sell another book. And he made a TikTok where he was reading some of his rejections from when he was on sub, and he just like, it was giving me war flashbacks actually, because it's like very similar to the kinds of rejections that I had gotten when I was on sub. Because it's just like paragraphs and paragraphs of being told like why your work and writing is so good, but we just don't know how to make this book break out. I could literally go on and on and on and on. Like, these are just a few examples of many that have been publicly talked about. I think another interesting example of meritocracy and publishing is the discourse around Silver Elite by Danny Francis. This is a novel that was released to basically appeal to the romantasy crowd, but instead of fantasy, it's set in a dystopian setting. This book came out of nowhere and was pushed very heavily. Danny Francis is an alias. This is an anonymous author who apparently has previously been a best-selling author under a different name, but for whatever reason, they chose to write as a faceless author with a pen name. And I think the fact that Danny Francis does not have an existing social media presence, this is the first book that they've released under this name and whose success was put together by the publisher. It just goes to show it's not just about having a TikTok platform, but it's about which author brands and which kinds of stories are perceived as being widely commercially appealing. Listening to all of this can be really disheartening as a newer writer. I understand that. It can feel like the game is rigged and what's the point? I have a few things that I want to say to end this video on a positive note. Firstly, I was reading a Substack from Christina Lee, who is a middle grade and literary fiction author whose adult debut, The Manor of Dreams, just came out this year and which I am reading right now, and I honestly think is going to be one of my favorite books of the year. It took me 10 years from when I first wrote a book to when I published a book. Every day of those early years, I wished it would come sooner, that I was a better writer, that I could write the magic words that would make a publisher immediately drop everything and publish me. I now know there is nothing more precious than the decade I spent working, tearing my work apart, self-actualizing, revising, rebuilding my craft, playing in the sandbox of my mind and my mind alone. That was my becoming. My memories are not complete nor perfect. My brain is not a machine, but I do remember when I got my first book deal. I got the email and I wept. I was for a moment filled with all of my past selves from the last 10 years who had dreamed and worked for this moment and crafted every sentence in that book. The sweetness, the relief, the hard-fought sheer fucking joy. Nothing but time and labor could give me that. Even though we know that publishing isn't going to reward us based on our hard work and our merit alone, I think it has been very important to discuss the realities of what publishing looks like for 99.9% of us. The hard work is the point. I personally wouldn't have any interest in reading a book that I know is ghostwritten, which I'm not talking about Luke Bateman now specifically. I'm now just speaking generally. The value of art to me, and I know to many people, is the craft and intention and the journey of unraveling as a reader what an author is trying to say in their work as you're reading it. And I don't want to say that the solution starts with readers necessarily, because unfortunately most readers are not going to go out of their way to read what's not already in their algorithms or on a bestseller list. I do think there is some power in readers demanding quality books, edited books, seeking them out. There is power in diversifying your bookshelf. Following authors directly is also huge because we can be in your algorithms, and just showing publishers that books from queer or BIPOC writers are in fact books that you want to read and support and that will make money. The other thing I will say is if you read a book and love it, talk about it, post about it, even if it's like just one review, one Instagram story, one post, one tweet. When early readers for Local Heavens tag me in their 5-star reviews, it's so insane to me and can like totally make my day, because sometimes I forget that people are reading the book, and it's really special to have been working on something alone for literally years and years and years, and now I know that it's like also being read and enjoyed by other people. And word of mouth is so valuable to authors, especially those of us who don't have these big, huge, splashy deals. So if there's a book that you really liked, posting about it on social media or just talking about it to other people is a power that readers have. Writer solidarity also goes such a long way, and I'm so grateful to every author who blurbed my debut novel, because if you look, actually, most of the writers, pretty much all of them, ended up providing me a blurb are from BIPOC authors. And it's one of those things where I'm so grateful to authors who kind of like throw the ladder down behind them to support the rest of us. Beyond that, I think it's important to support emerging writers, both as writers ourselves and as readers, and to continue to have faith in our stories, because that is really the only power that we have besides speaking up for ourselves when we can. My debut novel, Local Heavens, is a queer dystopian cyberpunk reimagining of The Great Gatsby, and it is literary science fiction. If you like any of these kinds of stories, you might like it. It's available for pre-order now in the US, Canada, and UK. And what else? It would mean so much to me if you pre-ordered it or added it to your TBR. Happy Pride Month. If you want to support a queer book, a queer BIPOC book, it would mean so much if you supported Local Heavens. If you want to request an ARC, you can do that. You can request from a physical ARC from my publisher. If you're a book reviewer, you can also request a digital ARC on NetGalley. And thank you so much to everyone who has been reading and reviewing it and tagging me in their early reviews. It's so crazy. That's all. I have a Ko-fi if you want to support the channel, and that is all. We're gonna be vlogging the redecorating process for this office, so stick around for that. Thank you for watching. I hope all your writing projects are going well, and I'll see you guys in the next video.